Just yesterday, Pakistan's central bank held its key rate at 22% after its fifth continuous policy review. It
Hmm.
also, rather, it revised its initial projections for inflation and increased them for this upcoming year, for the entire year as well.
And I knew that somehow the Pakistani policymakers will be able to turn things around from this point onward. So I don't think the Pakistani economy is going to default. Economy as such is not a challenge. Politics is the challenge, and that has to be dealt with, I think, in a very, very significant and a comprehensive fashion. It just doesn't have the fiscal space to make long-term investments in human capital, without which we can forget about productivity enhancements, we can forget about GDP growth, we can forget about a tangible improvement in the quality of life of Pakistani people. How is the economy going to benefit the person on the street? And I think that is a $6 million question.
Mm.
And I think that's where we need to be very, very careful in examining what manifestos
Mm.
are coming out from different political parties. I mean, what kind of message they are sharing, and how serious do they appear in terms of their
Mm.
preparation?
Hello, everyone. My name is Norez Rana, and I'm an economist with the World Bank. I'll be hosting today's program on New Wave, in which we will be talking about the year 2023 in light of Pakistan's economic reforms and how the year unfolded in terms of the various issues that came to the limelight. We will also be talking about what to expect for this ongoing year, the year 2024. How are some of the policies that have been previously implemented are likely to change and their impacts that they will have on the common man for this year? And joining me today, I have Dr. Aqdas Afzal, who's a senior economist. He's been a professor at Habib University and also tends to advise and consult with various governments around the world. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
Likewise, we look forward to this very insightful discussion with you. So before I turn towards you, I just want to set the stage a little bit. Just yesterday, Pakistan's central bank held its key rate at 22% after its fifth continuous policy review. It
Hmm.
also, rather, it revised its initial projections for inflation and increased them for this upcoming year, for the entire year as well. And I want you to kind of hold on to that thought because I want to ask about how you view this as a policy. But before that, I just want to quickly share a snapshot of the last year. Exactly a year from today, January 30th, Pakistan's foreign reserves were at $3.1 billion. And that accounts for less than 2 weeks of import cover. The country struggled to unlock, various forms of financing, both domestic and international. There was huge inflation in May of the year 2023. CPI was measured at 38.1%. Food inflation and certain elements of the food basket were measured at above 50% in terms of their value on inflation. The value of the petroleum prices, the energy prices were at an all-time high. The common man really felt the brunt of it, to the point that an additional 12.5 million people were pushed into poverty. The head count for the poverty ratio
Mm.
went up to 39.1% compared to 34% that was in the year 2022. Uh, all in all, Pakistan's economy was teetering on the brink of default. It was, widely debated, widely argued as to what can save Pakistan from this, behemoth sort of an issue that we're into. And then finally, the IMF staff level agreement happened for a $3 billion loan. But with that agreement, there were certain policies that the IMF expected that Pakistan will push through. These policies included hiking up the interest rate. The interest rate was increased by 300 basis points, going up to over 20%. And, it happened after 1996 that such an increase was accepted and endorsed by the government. Uh, and it was all done to cater inflation. But then here we are now again in the year 2024. The interest rate is, it continues to be held. We don't see any structural changes that are happening. As the way I view it, we're just pushing the barrel down the road. Eventually, we will be at the same conundrum where, the likelihood of default would very much be there. It's still there because we haven't done any changes to our production capabilities, things, the structural issues that are addressed in order to help the economy grow. So, in light of all this, how do you view the policies of the last year? Do you think have they been beneficial or have they helped address some of the key issues that the country had been facing?
Thank you very much, Norez. I think I will start by just saying that I think we need to be very careful whenever we use the term default, because if we are, using this term carelessly, and we are planting this idea in people's minds in the context of very, very extreme political uncertainty that Pakistan has gone through, it again suffering from political uncertainty. And it seems that the upcoming elections, even though there are very high expectations attached to them, I don't think they are going to be able to reduce the political temperature in Pakistan for obvious reasons. But having said this, I firmly believe that Pakistan's policymakers are of a level that Pakistan as an economy is not going to default. I have said this consistently over the last 2 years when this outlook was way more bleaker than where we are today. I mean, we were basically staring down the abyss. And I knew that somehow the Pakistani policymakers will be able to turn things around from this point onward. So I don't think that Pakistani economy is going to default. So I think that's something that it is not going to happen. Now, what is going to happen is that the situation is going to remain very, very challenging in terms of the very, very high rate of inflation that people are facing in Pakistan. Because of the very high policy rate, as you rightly mentioned, is one of the conditions attached to the the
The IMF
standby
agreement.
arrangement.
Yeah.
Yeah, the standby arrangement that was reached with the IMF. They basically want to have a real how should I say, a real positive interest rate, which we don't have right now. And because of that, we have to keep increasing the policy rate. I think because of that, the economic activity has been subdued, number one, because if the cost of capital stands at 22%, it becomes almost impossible for any firm, any organization, any business to take out a loan and to make capacity enhancements or to import something by taking out loan. So that's number one, and then it has a huge impact on the fiscal side, Norris, because this huge borrowing that the Pakistani government has done in terms of the local currency, whenever the interest rate goes up to that level, it basically debt servicing basically eats up your entire fiscal space, leaving nothing to spend on human development or human capital, which is so very important. So whenever we talk about human capital, we are basically talking about education, we are talking about health, and we are talking about clean drinking water, so on and so forth. So I think these challenges are going to remain primarily because Pakistani political system is not able to come out of this very, very volatile situation that it has been facing for over 2 years now. Economy as such is not a challenge. Politics is the challenge, and that has to be dealt with, I think, in a very, very significant and a comprehensive fashion.
So that's actually rightly pointed. We cannot isolate the impact of politics or the institutional crisis that are brewing on the economy and with the economy, because these things tend to work in tandem. But one thing that you mentioned here, and you might feel I'm putting you into the spot, but I'm actually very curious to know that you said that the policymakers in Pakistan are of a caliber, and you feel confident that they would help the country mitigate or kind of help the country stay away from default. But what we've always seen is that whenever such a scenario has arisen, it really hasn't been much of a policy change, but we've been able to rely on either bilateral partners or multilateral, institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, who've come to somewhat help Pakistan, navigate those the issues with debt. Here, what really do you mean that what actions have been taken by the Pakistani policymakers that have really help navigate through this challenging landscape, because I don't find them to have done something drastically uh, disruptive to help change the landscape of Pakistan's economic moves. For the last decade or so, we've been, going through the same cycles. Every year, there's a new government. It tends to accumulate even more debt, and it keeps on putting Pakistan at a greater risk of default. So
Okay, so these are two different questions. I think the first question is whether the economy is going to default or no, and the clear answer is no. The economy is not going to default, and I think there is a second question. How is the economic situation or the economic outlook going to become better for the average person on the street? And I think that's the question where I would agree with your analysis,
yeah, yeah.
because I feel that because of the kind of situation that Pakistan faces as a developing country, having zero or little fiscal space, it just doesn't have the fiscal space to make long-term investments in human capital, without which we can forget about productivity enhancements, we can forget about GDP growth, we can forget about a tangible improvement in the quality of life of Pakistani people. So I think these are two different questions, where I have confidence in Pakistani policymakers that they, no matter which political party they come from. Now, I'm not here to represent one political party. I have complete confidence in every single finance minister that has taken the helm in the last 10 years. I mean, from Dr. Miftah Ismail to Raza Bakir to Dar Saab. I think all of them have chipped in, tried to stabilize Pakistan's economy as best as they can. But the bigger question is,
right. Yeah, the lives of the common man. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the bigger question is, I mean, how is, the economy, how is the economy going to benefit the person on the street? And I think that is a $6 million question. And I think that's where we need to be very, very careful in examining what manifestos are coming out from different political parties. I mean, what kind of message they are sharing, and how serious do they appear in terms of their preparation. So before coming on your program, I was just looking at the three different political parties' manifestos vis-a-vis education, because I think as an educationist, as a professor in a university, as an economist, I feel that education is this one single important, significant input, without which you can forget about, Pakistan ever producing value-added exports that we so, we need them. There's a dire need of producing value-added exports, because our imports are increasing. And unless we are able to, move towards the value-added side of the spectrum, I mean, we can forget about, finding a sustainable solution to our persistent and continuous current account deficit. So, I mean, I was looking at these manifestos, and I found that out of the three main political parties, now I'm talking about the PMLN, People's Party, and PTI, I have to say, I think I found the PMLN's manifesto talking about education to be very, very concrete and to have tangible KPIs. When it comes to the People's Party, I mean, it seemed like they had just thrown in a lot of language without properly thinking about what it is that they are trying to achieve. And the PTI's education manifesto was all over the place. I mean, there was so much stuff written there without any specifics. So I think this program would be this episode would be a very interesting invitation to the young people or anybody who's interested in finding more about these political parties, because elections are just around the corner. I would really invite them to study these manifestos, because all major political parties, and I would also include Jamaat-e-Islami in it, because I mean, I was also looking at their manifesto vis-a-vis education. Do your homework, make up your own mind. I'm not here to really suggest which political party it is that is going to steer Pakistan out of the crisis. I think all political parties are going to have to chip in.
Yeah.
But saying that is very, very easy. Uh, but I don't know how stable the political system is going to be after the next elections. I really hope and wish that it is, but the way it is appearing right now, I
Yeah.
don't think it is
Yeah.
going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's we need an entirely different topic and a different episode altogether to discuss both the legitimacy and the autonomy of the governments who may arise post the elections of 2024. But coming back to the main topic, I think I cannot agree more that the primary driver for growth, economic growth, and prosperity is investment in human capital and human development,
Hmm.
and that which we have been lacking due to myriad various different reasons, and lack of fiscal space being one of them. And then speaking of, very closely related to human development is, prosperity and well-being of an individual at the household level, the common man precisely. And one thing that directly impacts the common man as a result of various high-level economic policies is inflation. When they lose their purchasing power, when the food basket tends to gain its price, there's little that they can invest. Especially, I mean, you would be well aware, and we know that one key metric of identifying how well a country is doing is that how much does a certain household has to invest on its own self, in terms of education, in terms of health, in terms of even leisure activities, something that is helps grow both intellectually and physically. But with the purchasing power shrinking, with the high levels of inflation, an everyday family in Pakistan is left with little options to pursue those avenues. And inflation in Pakistan is to some degree linked to the level of to the value of the currency, because like you mentioned as well, that Pakistan is an import driven, consumption oriented economy. Even the raw materials that we use for our production purposes are imported from elsewhere. And what we've seen is in the year 2023, the rate of PKR in comparison to the dollar, the green buck, uh, humongously lost its value. It went as it went as up as 300 rupees at the interbank rate, and at the market it was trading at somewhere close to 350. And then suddenly we see that now it is at 280 rupees or so, somewhere around that mark. But there hasn't been any much structural change, or not that one that I have witnessed, that kind of uh, justifies that drop in value. So, A, is it still being arbitrarily, manipulated? Is that the right value? And what are the repercussions? It went from 220 to 300 because at that time it was being touted that Mr. Isakdar is arbitrarily, he's pegged it to the US dollar, and then it reached its market value. There was suddenly inflation increased, it shot up. There was the second highest increase of the US dollar in Pakistan's history. Is there a risk that that might go up again from 280? What if it just goes to 350, 360? Now that is going to have an impact on inflation. It's going to impact the lives of the common man. How do you
It's
view
not
that?
going to happen. It's not going to happen. And because Pakistan's current account fundamentals are very, very, how should I say, salubrious or in Pakistan's favor at the moment. I mean, if you look at the first 6 months of this fiscal year, I mean, we are almost at break even. And this is a break even comparing exports to the sum of exports and remittances, which is how it should be. So I think the currency is going to stay stable, and I would reject this, very respectfully reject this notion that somehow Ishaq Dar was trying to peg the exchange rate to the US dollar. Pakistan simply does not have the foreign exchange reserves to play this game. And uh, even if somebody thinks that they can somehow try to artificially maintain um, the rupee exchange rate where they want it to be, I think this is a very dangerous thinking, because if anybody tries to do that, we are just going to burn through whatever little foreign exchange reserves that we have. And that is a situation which reminds us of a neighboring country in South Asia. 2 years ago,
Yeah.
Sri Lanka went through
Yeah.
something very similar. And I think Pakistani policymakers watch that situation very, very closely, and they have learned the right lessons of how not to do it. Nobody was trying to do it in the first place. Yes, I mean, maybe some pressure was being exerted on, exchange rate dealers or what have you. And the SIFC has played a very positive role in, trying to convince people by not convincing them, but at least going against those who were trying to hoard US dollars or short the Pakistani rupee by trying to make a quick profit. And I think those are completely legitimate actions by any government, because you don't want people to hold your currency, uh, blackmail you on your exchange rate, or to artificially short this your currency. I think those are not something that any government should accept. Pakistani current account fundamentals are better than where they were 1 year ago, and now the big question mark is the political situation. If the political situation remains in control, I see no problems for Pakistan's exchange rate. But the big question mark again is the political situation. If that deteriorates after the elections, if no political center of gravity is found, then I think all bets are off.
So, in addition to even the Pakistan's political scenario, I'd also want you to kind of delve a bit deeper into the external political environment that is shaping around the world. We know that there was a Russia-Ukraine crisis, which led to the increase in energy prices. Again, it impacted Pakistan. Pakistan's US is one of its leading traders that Pakistan, a country that Pakistan tends to trade with. Now, there's this sentiment brewing in the United States that it might hit some sort of a period of recession in the year 2024. And even more importantly, 2024, even in the US, is an election year. On the other hand, we have China, who's consistently tried to, expand its influence over the world through BRICS. It's one of its avenues and channels through which it tends to, set up those trading partnerships and its lines of influence. And then we have India right next to us, who also have an election in the year 2024. So how are these various political external factors likely to impact and influence Pakistan, as a country, and also Pakistan's economy?
I think that's a very good question. I think the first thing that your economy watchers are looking at right now, I think they're all concerned about the coming protracted weakness in the global economic conditions, and this coming, what they're looking at and what they are wary about. I mean, that's on the horizon. Even though the U.S. has, in a very significant way, been able to avoid this recession or the hard landing that you referred to. I think the consensus opinion is that the US has successfully avoided the hard landing, and they're moving towards a soft landing. And now many analysts are looking forward to the date when the US Federal Reserve will finally start lowering its almost the all-time high. Well, it's not the, it's a very high interest rates that we have seen in a very long time, for that matter. So they're all looking forward to that. Having said that, I think the greatest danger that the global economy plus developing countries like Pakistan are facing has to do with this ongoing geopolitical fragmentation or geopolitical volatility that we are now witnessing, especially in the Middle East, and what repercussions that is going to have. I mean, for Pakistan, the greatest repercussion is going to be a spike in the price of oil. And I think as a developing country that imports a major chunk of fuel, I think that's a scenario that our policymakers, whoever is going to take over after the elections, I think we need to have a plan B for that situation right now. I mean, I've heard people talking about enhancing our strategic reserve. I think we need to have a strategy as to if and when that happens. I think the second thing has to do with this scenario of Donald Trump becoming the president of the United States and how that is going to impact the global economy. For example, if he slaps unilateral tariffs against China or Europe, and then China and Europe start slapping retaliatory tariffs against the US, how is that going to impact the global economy? How are the markets going to respond to that? And I think finally, something that is really keeping economy watchers up at night has to do with this massive enhancements in artificial intelligence and how the artificial intelligence is going to impact our economy. Now, there is a lot of debate on whether artificial intelligence is good or bad. I think largely it's good. And advanced economies are going to make best use of artificial intelligence by enhancing their productivity. But artificial intelligence is also going to bring about a trust deficit. I mean, when I talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence, if there are massive leaps in AGI, I think that is going to bring about massive trust deficit, and anything that reduces trust in the global scenario is going to have a negative impact on the economy. So I think these are 2 or 3 big things that at least I am worried about. Number one, the ongoing geopolitical volatility leading to more geoeconomic fragmentation. Countries retreating towards regional blocks, countries refusing to do offshoring, countries moving towards friendshoring. The second thing I'm really concerned about is Trump 2 and how that is going to impact developing countries. If there is a trade war between China and Europe and the US, how is that going to impact Pakistan? I think finally, I am worried about the ongoing developments in artificial intelligence, which has largely been for, it's been a positive development. But what if, because of deep fakes and what have you, there is a massive trust deficit, and how that is going to impact our economy and how Pakistan is going to deal with it? I think for these 3 things, Pakistani policymakers should already have their plan B in place.
No, these are all very key considerations, I think, that you've mentioned. And actually, I would like to point out to the one specifically to artificial intelligence, because we tend to talk about geopolitics and their influence and their impact on local economies. It's a topic that's been widely studied, but this AI is a very new angle that you bring to it, and it absolutely makes sense. Especially, I think, given the disparity in the use and access to artificial intelligence, it also tends to perpetuate a countrywide divide, like a divide between countries as well. Because those who are like more digitally, who have a better infrastructure, they have better abilities to kind of optimize their use of AI and how they're going to leverage it to their own benefits and their uses.
I think for the most part, artificial intelligence is going to be beneficial for advanced countries. But in the case of developing countries, which are, don't have that level of economic sophistication, I think artificial intelligence like deep fakes or what have you, I think these could end up becoming a force of disruption and destruction in developing countries. So I think that is something that I am concerned about as a citizen of the developing world or the global south.
I absolutely share your concerns. There's no doubt about that. So on that note, just before we end, a question that if a common man is listening to this, how can they prepare themselves? What are the things that they should be wary of? Even if they cannot be prepared, at least be mentally prepared to expect and accept what is going to happen in the year 2024, on the economic front that would likely impact their lives.
I think nobody has a crystal ball. I think nobody really knows what is actually going to happen. But I think when it comes to Pakistan, I think we are going through a very momentous period of our history, where people are becoming extremely politically conscious and active. And I think in the medium to the long term, even though these are extremely volatile and uncertain times in Pakistan, and certainly we have seen a lot of violence and volatility, I think in the medium to the long term, I think, Pakistani democracy, inshallah, is going to become stronger. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that democracy is really the best political institution that can deliver people for all their problems. I mean, be they uh, financial or economic issues, or foreign policy related. I think democracy is really our Pakistan's answer to our problems.
Well, I guess then there you go. I would suggest that people go and exercise their right to vote in the upcoming elections and make sure that it tends to bear some tangible fruits for the country. On that end, thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure
Thank
having
you.
you and learning so much from you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.